Okay. We'll give everybody just a few moments to join. And thank everybody for joining us today. And so we'll just wait a minute. We have people coming in from our Zoom registration invitations and also from our Facebook live stream right now. Okay. And my name is Heather Dawson. I'm with MaxSold, and I am helping to host this webinar with Marty Stevens-Heebner. And we are very excited to have her join us today and talk about, is it hoarding or just clutter? She's going to talk about how to manage the stuff of a lifetime. Marty is also our NASM president, National Association of Move Managers. She is also the host of a podcast called How to Move Your Mom and Still Be on Speaking Terms Afterwards. So she's going to talk to us a bit today, but before she starts, we're going to do a quick poll, which will come up momentarily for us. Okay, so what is your connection with MaxSold? We would love to know. Are you an organizer and move manager, or a reseller, or a repeat seller? Or are you just a MaxSold buyer? Or are you something else? Like a lot of organizers here today. And just so everybody knows, when you have any questions, please submit them into the chat or into the Facebook feed, because I will at the end be helping to ask those to Marty in our Q&A section. All right. And also one more request, if anybody can access the chat, please do put in where it is that you have heard about MaxSold from others, or where you heard about our webinar today, because we would love to know that too. Okay. We'll share the results. Most of us are organizers and move managers. And maybe if you are in the other category, go ahead and put in the chat who you are and what it is you do. And on that note, I am going to hand this over to Marty, and we will get rolling.
Thank you so much, Heather. It's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you. Okay, I'm just going to rearrange my own Zoom. You can see what we're talking about. Is it hoarding or just clutter? How to manage the stuff of a lifetime. And I know everybody's fascinated by hoarding, including me. It's very interesting, and I'm looking forward to talking more about this. So let me get this started. There we go. So this is clutter. You know, it's not impeding the way or anything like this. It's just everyday clutter. Now this is hoarding. That's a serious paper hoard. Now, I tend to nerd out when I do something like this and I study and talk about it. So thankfully you'll have the PDF, so you can click on the links, you know, on the the bottom right there, there's a link, and really look at these things more closely. So this is the clutter hoarding scale from the Institute of Chronic Disorganization. And they measure it on different levels. It's not just the amount of items. It's not just that. There's so much more involved. It deals with the actual structure of the home, because when you get into a serious hoarding situation, the house is falling apart. I don't know, for those of you who might watch the show Hoarders or his wonderful show Legacy List with Matt Paxton, Matt is just, he's been working with hoarding situations and helping people move and downsize for such a long time. He was on the show Hoarders for 12 years. And he has talked about, he's a good friend, and he's told me about the time he walked in and he was walking through this hoarding situation, a very severe one. And he noticed all the, excuse me, floor joists had separated from the baseboard in the wall. And it occurred to him, he was actually walking on top of the hoard in the basement, which is horrifying and very dangerous when you think about it. It also measures the clutter hoarding scale, also measures the number of animals, sometimes people are animal hoarders, and pests, more commonly known as vermin, because especially, again, when you're in a really bad situation, there's all kinds of bugs and other critters you run into. Is the household functioning right? Is the plumbing working? Is the electricity working? Can you get up and down the stairs? Health and safety. There's often a lot of mold involved. There's again, from the vermin, there's dried feces and all that fun stuff. And then also how much PPE, we all know what that means now, personal protective equipment, like the gloves and the masks, et cetera, that you need. And again, when it's a severe hoard, you are well covered. So that it measures on all those things, all those. And when you are working in a hoarding situation, especially if you are hiring someone, which I recommend, you want to find a hoarding specialist. Now, Clearum Solutions for hoarding specialists. There are other companies that are also just brilliant at doing this, but you want somebody who really has specific training. And I think as we go through this, you'll understand why. So when it's a level 4 or 5, these are it measures on a 1 to 5 scale. When it's that bad, you really want to bring in not only a specialist, but also a psychiatrist or therapist who is a hoarding specialist. They have worked with hoarders before, because again, you'll see it's a special kind of technique that they need to use. Also, in those situations, you're probably going to need to bring in some sort of hazmat company like SteriClean or Service Master, who really cover themselves in the full body suits and go in, because it's dangerous. So again, this is hoarding. This is just clutter, just so we get a visual distinction. So let's talk about the dangers of hoarding. And yes, that's another one. That was a fun garage to work in, let me tell you, on the left. It leads to isolation and loneliness. I mean, so did COVID, Lord knows, but that can exacerbate or lead to mental illness, depression, obviously, but also if it's as somebody who's older, it can exacerbate dementia quite a bit, and it becomes even more dangerous in those situations. It leads to poor eating and unhealthy habits. They eat expired food. It's very dangerous for pets, and they're often, they're not going outside to empty, as I like to say, they're doing it in the house. And there is also very unsanitary conditions in terms of, they often have what's called a nest. Again, this is extreme hoarding. I remember being on a site where I was going through with my project manager, and the stairs were rickety. There were jury-rigged lights. You often find electricity jury rigged in these situations, very dangerous. And I said, that's the nest right there. That's where, oops, I lost my light. I don't think that it matters, because I don't think you can see me. And sorry for the noise. And I said, that's the nest. That's where she sleeps, she eats, and everything else. And I said, where did she go to the bathroom? Because the bathrooms weren't functioning. They said, oh, I hadn't thought of that. So all these things come into play. Other dangers, again, unsanitary conditions like mold and bacteria growth, allergens, lots of dust. Often, with vermin, we find rats' nests. Actually, one of my project managers a few months ago opened a drawer, and there was the mother rat leapt out and ran, and there was this lovely little nest of little rat babies. There will be their dried feces. You can find dead animals. That has happened before. In one case with ours, unfortunately, that a cat had gotten trapped in a locked closet. It was just dreadful. It's very sad. And also, if there are cats involved, you get all that ammonia from their cat pee in the air. It's just awful. The home, again, the home's, oops, I forgot an apostrophe, the home structural integrity. I mentioned the floor joists, the lack of repairs, plumbing and electricity, jury-rigged or non-existent, windows are broken, doors are off their hinges. It's just the house isn't functioning anymore. And then also, there are fire hazards. Newspapers can literally spontaneously combust. When paper starts to degrade and decompose, it generates heat. And so they can just catch fire. It's awful because in those situations, those hoarding situations that catch fire, they burn for such a long time because there's so much fuel. And then there are falling risks. We call it, in the trade, we call them rabbit trails, because you'll see, again, if you've watched any hoarding shows, or if you know someone who has a severe hoarding, is living in a severe hoarding situation, there are these very narrow, what we call rabbit trails, where they move from one place to another within the home. And it's so dangerous because it's easy to fall and people won't get found for days. So this is so dangerous when it's extreme. I'm in Los Angeles, so we deal with a lot of earthquakes. And then when it does finally rain, because we've got a drought going on, but then we get floods and there are fires and you get trapped by falling or shifting items. And again, you won't be, that person won't be found for quite a while. And then even when medical help arrives, they can't get in the house and find that person. So it's very dangerous in the extreme cases. When you're dealing, again, it's a 1 to 5 scale. When it's a 2 or a 3, it's not nearly as bad. But I like to talk about the extremes because I know people are curious. And also, as you'll see, sometimes talking about these issues when you're working or talking to someone who hoards, bringing up these kinds of issues will usually has a stronger impact than just saying they have too much stuff. There is something called hoarding disorder. It's official now. It used to be a subset of OCD, but now it is its very own hoarding disorder. Not everybody who hoards has it, but for those who do, the main points are that obviously they have difficulty discarding or parting with possessions, regardless of their actual value, how much they're worth, doesn't matter. They fill up and clutter active living space like a kitchen or a bathroom to the extent that its intended use is no longer possible. And they do have beliefs and thoughts that are associated with all their objects about how the instrumental, sentimental, and/or intrinsic value of those objects. I mean, some of our clients, I could really tell that when they let go of something, they physically felt it being taken away. Now, other things that can cause it, just so you know, it affects, in different studies, it's 2.6 to 6% of people living in the US. And believe me, it's a global phenomenon and it's been there through the ages. It's often comorbid with different disorders, OCD, ADHD, and then also depression. With the clients that we've worked with, I've been doing this nearly 10 years, we tend to work with them if they're comorbid with, more often if there's a comorbidity, with those with the depression. And it's not surprising that happens with the depression because sometimes it's nothing to do with hoarding disorder. It's just there was a traumatic life event. And when you're watching the hoarding shows, if you listen, there was usually something that happened. They were dismissed from a job. They had a horrible injury and it took a long time to recover. There was a divorce that was so sad and tragic, or the death of a loved one, death of a child, a death of their spouse, and they just kind of got so depressed they kind of gave up. Now there are different types of hoarding. Paper, newspapers, junk mail, anything financial, bills, taxes, statements, books, magazines, articles. So they will hold on to paper. And honestly, especially with books and articles and things, professors, attorneys, and writers are just notorious. Other people hoard containers. They hoard expired food and other waste. And then you've heard of animal hoarding, and they often mean well. And this is something I have to train my employees and my wonderful staff. I have to say, I understand that you may be horrified by the state of the animals, please realize the person who's hoarding them means well, but they don't realize that the health of their pets is as compromised as their own health in a hoarding situation. And that picture there on the left, yes, all that came out of that one van. It was pretty remarkable. All right. So there are different types of people who hoard as well, different types of hoarding. There's the utility dumpster, they're the so-called dumpster divers. Everything has a use, every single thing. And so they just go around collecting everything because they're going to use it. They're going to put it to use at some point. They really believe that. And then there are the sentimental hoarders, like those who really, keep every single souvenir, photo, anything that reminds them of a wonderful, that's part of a wonderful memory of a loved one, that sort of thing. I remember working with someone who had just closets full of her late husband's clothing, and she couldn't bear to part with it, even though he'd passed away several years earlier. I mentioned animal hoarding, and again, they really think they're helping these different animals, but they're really not. And then familial hoarding, and this is very interesting. It can actually run in families, believe it or not. It can run in families. All right, and I have a couple of quotes through this presentation, and think about what's inside the minds of those who hoard. This is somebody who's an author and also an organizer. And I love, especially these key points. I see a mass of stuff and assume it's full of emotions. Every single item will represent a part of life I'm not ready to accept is over. And I love that part about rip my heart right out of my chest, because that is really what they're feeling. Because, every brain is different. And they perceive their possessions and items differently from most of us. And so you need to go at it with a lot of compassion. And I like to say, if you've met one hoarder, you've met one, I shouldn't say hoarder. If you've met one person who hoards, you've met one person who hoards. Now, when you encounter them, they may seem very angry on the surface, but underneath it all, they're usually deeply embarrassed. Because they don't let anybody inside their homes because they're embarrassed by what's there. They do know how bad it is. They just don't know where to start. And often they're angry because so many family members and so-called friends and even law enforcement have judged them. And so they're very angry about that because they feel, and understandably, they feel very misunderstood. Oftentimes they just don't know where to, they'd like to deal with all this stuff, but they just don't know where to begin. And in some cases, the way their brains are, they can't, and I'll talk about this in a moment, their executive function, the organizational part of their brain it operates differently. And then in the trade, we have something called clutter blindness. It was actually the same person who had that nest that I mentioned. During consultation, I'd been told by her daughter that there were 2 cars parked out on the street and that they were full of magazines and things like that. And so after going through, the part of the house in the consultation, I came out, I saw the 2 cars. They were very old, very dirty, flat tires, obviously not used in a long time. And I could see all the magazines, and I said, "Oh, I see there's, I see you've got, and how about in the cars? There's some stuff in here too." And she says, "Oh, there's really nothing there." And it was packed. Again, clutter blindness. And I said, "Well, I see some magazines in there." And she said, "Oh, there's just a few." And it was packed full of it. She couldn't perceive how much was there. So when you're working and helping someone who hoards, it's kind of a cross between a treasure hunt and an archaeological dig. And don't forget, in archaeological digs, they find the treasures, but they really have to dig for them. You find things like contracts and/or keys for off-site storage units. I remember one lovely client we worked with. We had my staff had come upon a contract for some outside storage units. And his name was Jim, and we presented it to him. And you should have seen his face. He kind of looked like, he'd been busted. He's like, "Oh, yeah." It was really kind of endearing in a way. You also find undiscovered rooms. Closets are not infrequent, but sometimes whole rooms, and you go in and there's just even more stuff in there. kind of remarkable. It's just blocked up by the rest of the hoarding situation. Cash, checks, social security cards, $50,000 in a bag of old bras, $10,000 in some socks, stuff in books. By the way, you always have to leaf through books. Don't just toss them on a pile, because often it's not unusual to find things in there. And also vital documents like wills and trusts, because somebody passes away and they don't think there's a will and trust, but you come across one. So it's really helpful, especially if it's signed, when you're helping someone who hoards. PPE is vital. N95 or KN95 masks, gloves, heavy duty gloves, not just the latex ones, because you can run into sharp objects. There's often a lot of dirt involved. So heavy duty gloves are really the norm. Booties, because again, they're in anywhere from a 3 to 5, there could be vermin involved, and you don't want to be taking home fleas, for example, to your own home. And also, in some cases, you want to have protective eyewear, especially if you're working in an attic or kind of, in elevated areas, because you just don't know what's going to fall on you and you don't want to damage your eyes. Now, this is something I'd mentioned a moment ago. Building trust is key. And part of this, is letting them know they're the ones in charge. I have to alert family members or fiduciaries or attorneys who brought us in to work with someone who hoards. I have to let them know, look, the first session and maybe most of the second session, very little will go out of the house, most likely. It's all about building trust. Again, they're very angry. People have been so critical of them, and it's very important that they not feel that they're being judged. I mean, we all, again, in my company, we all say, oh, I've seen so much worse, because 99% of the time we have. And so then, if it's so much worse than anything we've seen, it's a little fiblet, but it makes them feel better. Be cheerful, shake their hand, smile, be friendly with them, and just no judgment allowed. Because the reason they've kept these things, there are reasons they've kept these things. And they want that respected, and they feel so disrespected. And I say it's like dementia, because people, especially family members, get so frustrated with their older parents who don't remember things and keep asking the same questions. And just like dementia, in these situations, we have to remind them, especially when they're severe hoards and it appears that what we call HD, hoarding disorder, is involved, that it's the disease, or that awful event they suffered through that they haven't yet recovered from. That's what's going on. And you have to respect that. Again, no judgment, only compassion. Listen more and talk less. Let them know they're in charge. Ask them what their favorite and most useful items are. Let them tell the stories, especially in the beginning, because then they realize you do respect them, and you respect how much these items mean to them. And as I mentioned earlier, health and safety issues. When you're talking to them, and again, this comes from compassion, pointing out a trip hazard and its dangers is a lot more effective than saying, you don't need this, why do you have this? Again, that's very judgmental. Admire their favorite things. Ask them why they're special to them. And then also, as I say, if there's a trip hazard or something dangerous, talk about the danger and say, I worry that could be really dangerous for you. Is it okay if I set this aside? And once you build that trust, they do tend to listen to you and understand and really start working with you, because they realize that you're not judging them, you accept them as they are. Now, we do have people, I will say this, when someone calls and says, I think I'm a hoarder, 99% of the time they're not. They just have clutter on surfaces. Those who hoard don't usually self-identify. They often say that they're collectors. And so when you're going through their collections, what you can do, you'll find that they'll have 16 red sweaters, and 8 of them have tears or discolorations, or they don't fit them anymore, something like that. Well, when you encounter, excuse me, tears, scuffs, discolorations, whatever, something that requires repair, it really helps, rather than saying, oh, it doesn't fit you, or there's a tear here. Because sometimes they think I'm going to have some tea. sometimes they think, oh, well, I'm going to repair that. I'm going to repair that. Sometimes I will sometimes ask them, how long has it been like this? And if it's been like 6 or 7 years, why bother? You have better things to do than that. Or actually what's even more effective is just saying something like it's compromised. For whatever reason, putting it that way it can be much more successful than saying it's torn, it's discolored, or see how it's marked and things like that. I wish I could say I take credit for that term, it's compromised. It actually came from a book I read, but it can help. Also, it helps you to keep choices to 2 items at a time, because generally speaking, they're already overwhelmed by how many things they have. I'm so sorry. It's better to do, 2 items at once, this one or that one, because they tend to not dither as much. And dither's a derogatory term, but it's easier for them to make decisions between 2 things rather than 3, 4, 5, 6. So this one or that one. And I had a client, it wasn't a hoarding situation, but she did have a collection of ceramic pitchers, pitchers. And I'm going to get a hot flash. I'm so sorry. It's allergies. She had dozens and dozens, and it looked like very bright confetti. They were lovely, but where she was moving to in assisted living, obviously she couldn't take 75 of them. So I said, pick out your favorite 10, and I was going to be happy if she picked out 20, and then we could go from there. But she did pick out about a dozen, and when they were sitting there on the coffee table, it's amazing how you could appreciate how each one was a work of art. And so especially when you're dealing with someone who hoards, and you have to realize they are giving up a lot. For them, they are giving up a lot by only choosing, say, a dozen items. And just, take the time to remark on each one and really take them in, because they will appreciate it. They'll feel like they made good choices, which is key. And it'll help the process move forward. I'm going to cough again. Sorry. All right. Helping someone who hoards. As you're making progress, point out really positive changes. Like, look at all the light coming in from that window. The garage, you can fit your car in here. Even if they could just fit their bike in, that's something to celebrate. And also, oh my goodness, there's so much more air circulation. This is so much better, and you can move around more easily, and there's so much less dust. You won't be, coughing as much. No, I'm not in a hoarding situation, but still. Now, now we're going to get to the value of items, because it's not unusual for any of us to think our items are valuable. So let me tell you about a tale of 2 hoards. Both, we were dealing with beneficiaries, people that died. And then also, they were both what we call dirty hoards. They'd been there a while, lots of dust, cobwebs, etc. But in terms of the value of items, they were very different. In the case of one woman, I'll call her Carol, it's not an unusual name. She actually inherited 2 hoarded houses. And the thing is, going in there was some interesting stuff, because this person was interested in, they had different kinds of collections of geodes and crystals and things like that, and equipment that helped, deal with those sorts of things. And she had a multitude of auctions on MaxSold, because again, it's a hoarding situation. There were so many items, but with the collections that her loved one had in their homes, she made so much money using MaxSold. It was wonderful. It was great. Now, in the other case, with a different situation, and the person, again, not unusual first name, Brian, he was dealing with a home, and there was a lot of old computer equipment, including old, like among the first Apple computers and things like that. And he thought they were worth something. However, they were completely compromised. They were broken, they were discolored, they were not in good shape. And so after going through all of the items in the home, we realized there was really nothing to sell, because nothing worked. And most items were compromised. So here's the thing, when you're thinking about the value, not only of your loved one's items, but also your own, please be aware that it's just turning into a very different, it used to be all kinds of, let me go back, all kind, like roll top desks, those beautiful wood roll top desks. Back in the 80s and 90s, they'd sell in a moment. Now we often can't get them donated because nobody wants them. Think of the younger generation. They just want a table where they can eat at and put their laptop on. So, and they're minimalists, which isn't a bad thing. So it's a whole different situation with trying to get paid for your items. Thankfully, MaxSold is so efficient at just helping sell a regular household's worth of items, furniture, kitchen things, etc., because they do such a great job marketing it. And because it's local, it works wonderfully for so many of our clients who don't have these great collections of paintings or what have you. So that's why one reason we love working with MaxSold. Now, for those of you who are a little nerdy like me, I'm not going to go deep into these, but there are these studies. You'll get the PDF. They will be given to you. So if you're, again, nerdy like me, you can take the time to read through this. But there have been a couple of studies that indicate that it may be abnormal, unusual brain activity in certain regions of the brain that make it more difficult for those who hoard to make decisions, and who also just, they don't have much mental control over, separating things like, items and possessions from relationships, and realizing that it's really the relationships that are more important. Now, studies on possible treatment. What has been most successful, not in all cases, but at most successful is cognitive behavioral therapy, also known as CBT. And that's really psychotherapy and talk therapy, again, with someone, a therapist or psychiatrist who is a hoarding specialist, because they have to really have the patience and understanding of these people. It's a different kind of brain type. And what can happen is the person who's hoarding learns to identify their habits and their thoughts and beliefs, and start to recognize when those come up when they're considering letting go of their items. And they start to understand how being organized and your relationships with your family and friends, how those are so much more important than just the things they have. And it also can help when family members are also involved in either their own therapy or perhaps, some sessions together with the person who hoards. Right now, there are no medications currently approved for hoarding disorder. Now, if there are comorbidities like depression or OCD or ADHD, a doctor may be able to treat the additional malady with medication, which might help the hoarding disorder. But again, just for HD, there are no medications currently approved. This is a cool little chart I found from the International OCD Foundation that talks about hoarding, and it really identifies exactly what it's about. For example, with collecting, when people collect, it's intentional. They usually have a budget for it. They know when they're going to display it and display it beautifully, which is different from just wanting to get as many things as possible. And when we're at the bottom, they talk about squalor. Squalor, it's almost beyond a 5 on the hoarding scale. It's just when nothing is working in the home, it's such a dangerous place. They really need to move out, at least until it's completely repaired. Now, let's talk about clutter, because it is so much easier to deal with. But once you deal with it. So clutter is, as opposed to hoarding, clutter is temporary. Like, look at this countertop in the bathroom. It's neither harmful nor dangerous. It's not impeding movement throughout the home, like a hoarding situation can, where you can't get into a room. And I often refer to clutter as visual static. It does I find, for me personally, and believe me, sometimes I can pile up some clutter, but I know how to deal with it. But it's visual static. It's distracting. And so that's why I like to take care of it. Now, at Clean Solutions, we have our cleanse concept. And again, you'll get this as a PDF, so don't worry about memorizing it. So the C stands for concentrating on one room at a time. I'm going to go into each of these a little bit more. They each have a slide. You want to localize the items where they're put to use. Obviously, you want to eliminate items you no longer use. in one way or another, eliminate them in one way or another. You want to assign categories, apply labels, and allot containers for similar things. And note which items need special handling, like hazardous waste. You want to sustain your new lifestyle with the new methods you now know how to use. And then, of course, the last one is enjoy all the new space and convenience you have. So let's talk about concentrating on one room at a time. Like if you're working on your garage, stay in the garage until it's done. Because what can frequently happen is you go in and you say, oh, this should go in the, kitchen. This should go in the kitchen. So you go in the kitchen and then you're putting in a drawer somewhere like, oh, the junk drawer. I need to deal with this. So you start dealing with junk drawer. And then you find something that should go maybe out in the backyard shed or into a room somewhere. So suddenly you're somewhere else, you're outside. And then you see, oh my goodness, all the plants, I got to deal with this. So really no area gets done. And you believe me, you'll get very frustrated. So focus on one closet, the kitchen, one bedroom at a time. It's just much more efficient this way. Localize items where they're actually put to use. Obviously, this is a picture of the kitchen. Think of it this way. If you, like, for example, there was one of my, I think she was my very first client all those years ago. And she had a situation where in her bedroom, around the baseboards, there was about 6 inches of paper coming out all around the room from the baseboard. Because in her bedroom, what she liked to do, she had a little TV, she'd sit on the edge of her bed and she'd watch TV while she was paying her bills. So she was getting her bills paid. But the thing is, then she would put the paid bill or what have you down by the baseboards. And so she said, well, I guess I should be doing this out of the desk in the living room. And well, first of all, the living room was its own issue. But also I said, look, you're getting your bills paid. This part of the loop is working. Let's just close the loop. I said, let's get you a cute little filing cabinet, a little rack for your bills, tuck it over here. It won't be distracting. And then you can keep doing what you've been doing very efficiently, and then you'll just close the loop. So we did that. We organized all her different bills, made folders for things. I called her a few months later and she was just so happy because it was easy for her to do. That was already the way she did things. Her bedroom was where she localized paying her bills. It's perfect. So that's the thing, localize items where they're actually put to use. Eliminate items you no longer use. Items to keep, items to donate or sell. Again, through MaxSold, it's wonderful. By the way, in terms of donating and selling, especially with MaxSold, don't donate anything until after you've done the auction, because you'll be surprised what can actually sell. And the wonderful thing is it will be reused. That's beautiful. And then obviously there are always the items to discard. Now let's talk about assigning categories, applying labels, and allotting containers. In the trade, we call this gathering like with like. So for this part of it, your organizing toolkit will be garbage bags, Ziploc bags to gather things, garbage bags obviously for discarding, a labeler, and have a magic marker handy, garden gloves as in thicker gloves, and disposable plastic gloves, the latex, or if you're allergic to that, the other kind. And also containers to store items. You can certainly go to, the container store, or I know Staples has some, or order them on Amazon. You can get new ones, or you can simply reuse things. I mean, if you have a bunch of, say, empty shoe boxes you wind up with, use those to store items and just label what's in there. Again, noting which discarded items need special handling. Obviously, hazardous waste, electronic waste. There are often collection events in towns and cities, so keep your eye open. And also shredding. Don't forget, anything with a social security number, even if the person is passed, you want to shred. All banking statements, the things that identity thieves just love, you want to shred those things. And again, it is very important to sustain your new lifestyle with the methods I've shown you. For example, there's that saying, everything has its place. Well, it's amazing when you have organized things and you know where things go. It just makes it so much easier, and it's faster because you know where that item is. So you go there, you get it. And then remembering it, then choosing to put it back where it was, it will, you can, your future self will thank you because you made it easy for your future self to come find the very same thing. So close that loop. And then of course, enjoy all the new space and extra time you have. Again, extra time because you're not hunting and searching for the one thing you need. You know exactly where it is. Also, it saves you money because you're not rebuying something you can't find. There was someone who was in a one-bedroom and assisted living, and she was moving to a different community. I cannot tell you how many tubes of preparation H we found. At least half of them expired, but half of them weren't because she couldn't find one. And so she went out and got some more. It was a remarkable collection. Now, when you're thinking about, I love this quote, thinking about downsizing, organizing, think of it as simplifying your life. I love this quote from Hans Hofmann. The ability to simplify means to eliminate the unnecessary so that the necessary may speak. And that's it for now. That's it for my presentation. Thank you so much for listening and attending. I really, really appreciate it. Heather, I'm turning it back over to you.
Thank you so much, Marty. This was great. We are going to have some questions for you. Just before we do that, I want to make a very quick little announcement about the NASM conference that's coming up at the end of this month. MaxSold will be there. We're really excited. And if any of our partners and friends out there are going to attend, we would love to see you. We will have a booth there. Please stop by. We're super excited. And something that we are doing that's a little unique this year is we are looking to collect a book from authors, whether you're an organizer in NAPO or NASM, or you've written something interesting. We want to feature your book at our booth and include it in a raffle that we're going to have at the conference. So if anybody is interested in donating a book that they've written, I'll put my info in the chat. I'm Heather Dawson. Reach out to me, and we would love to showcase that. But now I would like to share some of the questions we have for Marty.
Is it okay if I stop sharing so I can actually see your wonderful face, Heather? Or do you want me to keep this up?
You can stay up if you want or not. You're going to be talking and sharing your answers. So if you want to stay up with your face, you can. If you don't want to, it's your choice.
There we go.
Oh, there you go. So a first question we have is it hoarding if you have family heirlooms? Too many family heirlooms, I guess they feel they have. And what do they do? What do they do with them?
Well, again, go through, because remember, you have all those wonderful memories. Those are the important things, are the memories. And one little trick to do, and I neglected to put this in the presentation, I'm glad you asked this question, is you could take photos of these items. Get one of those digital frames that kind of changes the picture and such. And so that way you always can see the item because you've got a beautiful photo of it, but you can let it go. Think of it this way. Who else could, especially if you're not using it and not displaying it in some beautiful place that you and others can enjoy. Just think, who else could use this? Is there somebody out there who might like it? Sometimes you can't necessarily sell it, especially furniture. It's a nightmare out there, at least here in Southern California. And I'm hearing this nationwide because just the older population, we're talking 10,000 baby boomers turning 65 every single day. People are downsizing, especially during the pandemic. I mean, what else do we have to do when we were stuck at home? It's like, oh my God, all this stuff, let me deal with it. And so there's a glut of furniture out there. And unless it's pristine, mid-century modern, preferably by a known furniture maker, or like something from the early 1800s that was handmade, and again, in pristine condition. Often, if you're going to, say, approaching not an online auction like MaxSold, but say one of the bigger auction houses, chances are they won't be interested unless it fits those two categories. So what I would say is maybe first ask your family members, would any of them like it? First is you go through, are you using it? And does it delight your eye, or does it delight your eye every single day? And if it doesn't, contact your family members, send them photos, see if they would like it. Then you can also contact friends, if they would like it. And if they don't, and you're not able to sell it, you can always try eBay if it's not too big. If you can't sell it, you can go to Facebook Marketplace, offer it for free. There's the buy nothing groups. And just that way, at least it has a second life with someone who is going to use it and cherish it. That's, you want these items because clearly you cherish them. But if you're not using them and not cherishing them every day, then consider who else could use this, could cherish it. I mean, there have been times with, for example, with the Afghan refugees and other refugees coming here from the Ukraine. You know, often they come here with next to nothing. And so they are so grateful to have the opportunity, especially in heirloom. Oh my goodness, they'd be very grateful. So I hope that's helpful.
Good, very good answer. And somebody also had a question about cats. How many cats are considered hoarding?
Well, you know, if you have a small studio apartment, two cats is too much because there's just not enough room for them to go around. Or three cats. I mean, I'm sounding judgment. I'm not. It depends on the size of the studio. If you have a 10-room mansion and, you know, a catio, as they call it, where the cats can go all around. I mean, again, you don't want to have 20. I wouldn't suggest having 25 because you want to make sure that they're not fighting. Again, how many can you cherish at one time and really take care of? And you don't, it's not just that the smell of cat urine in your home can be offensive to others. It's also, especially if it accumulates, it's dangerous for you and your wonderful lungs because it's that sharp smell. It's ammonia, and you do not want to be inhaling ammonia when you're home for so many hours every single day. It's not bad. I don't think it's even good for the cats, although I'm not a veterinarian, so don't quote me. But those are the, you know, can the cats really enjoy their life? Are they healthy? Are they clean? Are they using the litter box? This is key. They need to be using the litter box or perhaps going outside, but be aware that when they come in, they could bring fleas. And that's never good because not only you get flea bites, but they can also be infected fleas. So it's hard for me to say exactly how many, but take those things into consideration, please.
Okay, so another question, how do you get rid of stuff that would be like mementos from your children, pictures and things you've saved? And how do you deal with it if the kids just don't want it all? I kind of went through something like this recently.
Well, here's the thing, especially if you're an adult child of an older parent who's downsizing, please just say yes and take them. Just say yes. It's a lot easier. And then once you possess them, you have the right to do anything you want with them, including put them in the trash. Here's something though, too, if your kids are rejecting it and you want to let them go, take photos. Again, take photos of those items. And you don't have to take photos of every single one. But, you know, for example, my own mementos, I have some. And I, you know, every few years I go through and cull them. And basically, it's especially if I can remember the moment that, you know, that can be worth keeping. Now, if you have great memory and can remember every single moment of, you know, 2 boxes worth of stuff, maybe, you know, considering which tugs at your heart. And then again, if they all do, you know, again, look to see which ones are compromised. I mean, there have been some of mine where I thought, I love this item, but it's falling apart. And again, you can still take a picture, you know, or it's okay to just let it go because that item is not your child. Although I do have an amazing story to tell quickly. There was a woman who had a hoarding situation, about a 3 in her apartment. She was moving to assisted living and she was dreading it. It ended up being very good, but anyway. And the last day we were there, in like the bottom of a drawer, we found this child's drawing that was clearly a very old drawing. And it just stopped her because her son, I forget his first name, her son had drawn that when he was 7 years old and her son had died at 17. It just stopped all of us. The last day, it felt like almost a blessing from him. It's remarkable.
Well, let me see if we have some other questions. Let's see.
Yes, please.
Nicole shared that she often has clients that are hoarders and have dementia at the same time.
Not
um,
unusual.
which makes it more challenging. And she's found that every session can become like a consultation again, if that makes sense. And,
It does. I completely understand. I'm going to quickly kind of take a little aside to that. Often we hear from adult children say, oh, my mother's a hoarder. Well, we go in and the living areas themselves, like the living room where they watch TV, their bedroom, the kitchen, they're cluttered a bit, but it's not crazy. But there are some other, like in the garage or in the spare bedrooms. Yeah, there are a lot of boxes piled up. It's because they're older and they're in pain and they have fatigue. And so they just put it in those rooms they're no longer using. And so that's, I don't really consider that hoarding. It's just like physically, they can't do as much as they used to. And they need help, but non-judgmental help is what's key. Now, dementia, that is very tricky. I mean, ideally, sometimes we'll come at it. I was going to say it's better if they're not there, because they forget from one moment to the next, as Nicole well knows. It's just part of the disease. One way to approach it, especially if they're moving out, like to assisted living, ask them to tell you what their favorite things are. Let them tell the stories, let them point them out. And especially, and Nicole, because you do this professionally, there's a lot you can put on walls. So if there are certain photos, not everything, but a number of photos, artwork, and especially what's across the bed from them, because that's really important, because it's the first thing they'll see when they wake up and the last thing they go to sleep seeing. But again, when you're going through these items, are they compromised? And think about, if there's a nail poking through on a piece of furniture, for example, you could hurt yourself. We want you to stay safe. You don't want this jamming in somewhere, and then you gotta go to the hospital and get stitches, and nobody likes going to the hospital. So that helps. But that's kind of how I find out what that person really loves, what they tend to go to, and keep asking them what their favorites are. And again, look for items that are compromised and see if that will help. And one of our tricks, I mean, I don't know if you work with them on your own. I have a staff, we have a few, we almost always have a few people on the site at least. What'll happen is there's the one person who's going through the items with the person with dementia. And then as soon as they pick something or choose to let go of it, our staff member will quickly hand it off to the other staff member and they'll get it out of sight. So sometimes that's a way to do it. Now it's tricky because sometimes you got dumpster divers and they'll just go out and get it out of the dumpster. So if there are bags of donations, get them out of there that day. Just get them out of there. Trash is, they can go back in the dumpsters, but you can always, and again, it's difficult. It's challenging because you are dealing with those memory issues. And I admire you, Nicole, because I know it takes a lot of patience. So I hope a couple of those tips are useful to you.
Definitely. So here's a question. Can a collection become a hoarding situation? Like, even if it's organized, like, could it be?
Yeah, I've been in those, and it's, I can remember this one, it really was like little pops of fireworks because everything was so colorful. But, again, yes, it can. I'm trying to think. I'll do it from the point of view of the collector. Let me do that, because I'm not sure if this is a collector themselves or if it's someone they know who is. I mentioned that every few years I go through my own personal items, and I cull them because, of course, I gather more. So what I would do is, I mentioned that one client I worked with where I had her pick her favorite. I said 10, hoping for 20, and she pulled out 12, and they were beautiful. Go through and really start categorizing. Which are my favorite 10? Think of them, maybe I'll organize them like 1, 2, 3, or there's another thing. I have to remember this: friends, acquaintances, and strangers. That's another way to approach. Again, not an original thing on my part, but again, we use this in the trade. Which ones feel like friends to you? Because there's a great memory or it's so beautiful, what have you, and it's in pristine condition. That's a great way to call actually your collection. Is first look for the things that are compromised, number one, and then start, assign them, like create a tier and assign them each to a tier. Like a friend is something you just love. Again, they're my friends. You love them. They're familiar. The acquaintances you kind of know. Yeah, that's kind of like the, well, maybe. And then there are the ones where, you know what, I don't even remember where I got this. It's the lesser part of that collection, whatever you're collecting. And those probably the strangers, you don't, I mean, not that every single person, I mean, human beings are very important, but when you're dealing with objects, there's probably someone else, think of them this way. There's someone else who will love having them because they're just starting to collect them. Think of it that way. And you can donate them. Or if it's a valuable collection, you can sell them through MaxSold or what have you. And then with the acquaintances, again, go set the friends you want to keep, but again, really focus. They have to light up your life, really be, useful, spark joy. Although, can I say not everything has to spark joy? Because like, I love this pencil, this is a pencil. It doesn't spark joy, but it's really helpful. Excuse me. So start thinking of things that way. Assign a tiered structure and really be clear about what you want. Because yeah, things can get out of hand over the years. And I just recommend that every couple of years, you go through and say, okay, which ones are still my favorites and my friends? And really focus on those. And then displaying them beautifully, because it's easier to appreciate that kind of collection, especially for others to appreciate when they can see each clearly instead of being overwhelmed visually. I hope that helps.
Perfect. Well, there are a few comments that I wanted to share with you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we have, let's see, Barbara, I may say her last name wrong. Sheesius, I'm sorry if I said it wrong, but she just wanted to say that this is fantastic and that she appreciates you, Marty.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate you too, Barbara. Thank you for saying that.
For you. And Nicole said, was it Nicole, that this is a great session and thank you. And because I know you can't see all the comments that are coming through before, so I just wanted to share those extensions of gratitude for you being here today. And we really appreciate you having been here today. And if anybody has any other questions.
I did notice one pop up that I'd like to address. Somebody asked about ivory.
I just saw that. Yeah.
Right. And I don't believe you don't sell that on MaxSold, correct? In the auctions, you don't sell it.
No, there are regulations
exactly
around what we can and can't do with that.
Yeah. And when you're dealing with a reputable organization like MaxSold or a reputable estate company, et cetera, they're going to follow the regulations. There are places you can donate it to, but it's difficult to sell. And I'd be a little leery of anyone you met who does like to sell it, because you're not supposed to. There's a reason.
You can get in a lot of trouble, unfortunately.
Yes, you can.
Yeah, you can.
Even years later, they trace it back to you. Sorry.
We have one more question that came through the Facebook thread. She said, not sure if this is the place to ask, but she said, I'm struggling with organization. And unlike a lot of people who are watching, who are organizers, my husband's way of dealing with struggles is to shove everything off a surface into a box and then place the box in the basement. And how do I stop him from doing this? Multiple question marks. Would like to know the answer here.
Well, first of all, I'm really sorry that happens. I'm not sure from that. I mean, if you're still listening, if you can clarify, is it your stuff he's focused on? Because sometimes people will accuse the other spouse of hoarding when really they're the ones doing it, or maybe they both are, but they'll focus more on the other person's stuff and getting that out of the way. So I don't know if that's going on, but I think, again, you're going to get a copy of this presentation. Maybe sit down and show him or anyone the part about the compassion and the research studies, and say, look, you need to be compassionate about these things. We need to sort through them. It almost seems like he just wants to kind of erase it instead of really sitting with it and the discomfort and the vulnerability that comes with looking and the patience required to go through these things. You could ask him if it's okay if you go through them. And if he says no, then you need to say, we need to negotiate this. And come from it at it, and I'm sure you already know this, but come at it from a point of love. And just say, and you can ask him, is there a specific reason why you want to do that? If you can honest and just be friendly, just say, I don't understand. I don't understand or get, and I want to understand why. You come at it from there. Because it sounds like neither of you tend to hoard, but there is this practice. That's a problem. And if you can find out from him, ask him, and he may say, oh, whatever, but keep gently. And at some point, you're bringing that up. And at some point, hopefully, he'll reveal himself to you, why he feels the need to do that. I mean, if you can, I don't know how old he and you are, but for example, if his parents are still around or siblings or something, was that a practice in the family? Kind of just consider yourself a detective to find out, first of all, why he feels the need to do that. Because then once there's a place of understanding, and especially if he's being vulnerable, explaining why it drives him, why he has to do that, then you can say, well, can I give you my point of view? Anyway, it's a negotiation in a very friendly and loving way. I hope that helps.
Yes, definitely, definitely. I think that is it. I think those are all of the questions and comments here. Of course, we have a bunch of people that have just written in, thank you so much, and they've enjoyed this. And we're so glad that everybody came out today to hear Marty. And
thank you so much. Yeah. Well, and Heather, I want to thank you and MaxSold for this lovely opportunity. It's an honor to present on behalf of your wonderful company. I mean, we're so glad we get to work with you. It just helps so much, our clients are so grateful. And to be able to do that. And also thank you so much for all of you who attended. I'm very grateful. I hope this is, like I keep saying, I hope this was helpful. I really do. And you'll be getting a PDF. And if you have questions or want to contact me, my information is on the last page. And don't be shy about listening to my podcast, How to Move Your Mom and Still Be on Speaking Terms Afterward. It's on every major podcast platform. And you can also just go to howtomoveyourmom.com. It's very little of me and just a lot about some great experts. And even if you're in your 30s and think, oh, older life, that doesn't apply to me, trust me. First of all, it will, hopefully. And then also you will be dealing with the parents when we talk about planning and just fascinating topics. We recently had a death doula on, believe it or not. So thank you so much. And then thank you for letting me do that bit of self-promotion. Thank you. But please contact me if you have questions.
Okay, and I'm going to put in the chat real quick a link for getting the PDF, and we will mail it out as well.
Yeah. And like I say, if you want to, you can nerd out like me. There are a number of links. Again, bottom right-hand corner, you should just be able to click.
Perfect. I think that is it. Thanks, everybody. Thanks,
yes,
Marty.
thank you for being here. Thank you.